Good evening and thank you for having me here. It's considered impolite, I think, to correct people on the dais. I don't think I'm the longest serving. At a go, probably, but there are stalwarts before me who spent longer time in the ministry. So, with a writer, possibly, yes. A few sentences on the world in flux can only be descriptive. I'm not sure if I can read what this flux means yet before this August audience, but it is like never in the last, I dare say, 100 years, have institutions been left in a limbo, and not just financial but strategic. Every multilateral institution which serves particular purposes, which have successfully served earlier, are all now wondering where they are, what would be their immediate future, and how is it that they're going to redefine themselves. If I can cross the few sentences and go a bit more, particularly for the financial institutions, because we saw this opportunity during the G20 presidency, and you have one of the authors also who had worked with Professor Shankaracharya during the G20 on the finance track, where he chaired it, one of the committees. We saw an opportunity, and therefore Government of India in the finance track, during the track, picked up on issues which are going to be challenges in the next few years. But top of the agenda was reforming the multilateral financial institutions. We did have a very eminent committee which submitted its report, and at that time it looked as if it gave solutions, and at that time Brazil also showed keen intent in taking that agenda forward, which to an extent they've taken it forward during their presidency, and after that South Africa. But the solutions and the TOR given at that time appear to me, with benefit of hindsight, as having been limited. If you have to go by what you see this flux is before you, we could have given a wider, even more wider terms of reference to that committee, but as time evolves, you only hope that it will settle down. But it is getting complex, more and more complex. So the flux is not for keen observers of global economy or the financial world to observe and tell us. It is there before us, even for a layman to see how complex and how even more compounded it's becoming. So the job of what I would see the observers is tell us how to get out of it. Tell us, meaning not just India. It's got to be now a newly defined, newly fashioned multilateral institutions, not Bretton Woods 1, okay, Bretton Woods 2 is gone, is it Bretton Woods 3? It's got to be something like, if you could go for a currency with no gold backing sometime in the 70s, now it's already moving towards tokenization. And is that something which we see the depth of? Do we have a measure of it? And do we have a framework to say, can unilaterally countries take the truth? Who's going to who's going to be doing the oversight on these sort of things? And the popular understanding, with support of let us say, institutions like the crypto still had questions to answer for institutions, for central banks, for governments. So it's moving rapidly. The flux is not there for us to say, oh yes, it is. It's a dynamic flux. It's moving. And it's probably getting darker and darker because of the depth of complexity.
Thank you very much. India's priorities so do you think are the three topmost economic priorities you as a finance minister would like to be pursued?
One half of your book deals with that, right?
Yeah, that's right.
India related, and the other one is global. It's difficult for me to say which are the three topmost, predominant priorities. But even if I say one, it's going to have overlap on many others. However, to maintain the growth is the topmost priority. Growth is the topmost priority. And therefore, it will have overlap with the jobs. Do you have the value addition? So it's not measuring the GDP, it's the GVA. All that goes into the top one priority, it's growth. The global challenges and how does India fit itself in a jigsaw puzzle where the pieces are all getting redefined every minute. So are you going to be a static piece or are you going to be a dynamic piece yourself? And how do you go about redefining the contours of that piece so that it fits into that jigsaw which is ever changing? Very complex. I just put it simply using this, example that we can take when we play the jigsaw, the problem. But it is every piece is dynamic, and you're there already, as are many countries. But are you going to be redefining yourself? How would you do it? Will you be fitting in it or not? So the global challenges are, I think, there, and therefore the second most important objective for India would be to be relevant, to be there, not just to be there, but to be in the leadership position, to be able to define how this move is going to take India forward along with the rest of the countries. We need to define the global institutions which are going to govern us for the next 100 years. Are we there? Are we at the high table? What do we have as an idea to give there, which is going to be beneficial to India as well? But in this constantly, because we are also talking that we represent the global south, is it just redefining our contours or taking even the global south's concern? High time, and India has been trusted for the truth. So I would think the second priority would be for us to redefine the voice of the global south and fit ourselves also into it, and be at the table to be able to determine the contours of what the next 100 years would look like. And the third is, of course, within India. It's one thing to aspire to be at the table, it's one thing again to aspire to say that we have to maintain the growth rate. But are we fundamentally giving the economy the necessary support in every which way for every section that matters? At some point in time, it's create the jobs because you want to have the leverage of the demographic dividend. At some other times, you want your macroeconomic stability, so keep your fiscal prudence. Be sure that your budgets are made, keeping in mind that you've committed yourself to reduce the debt to GDP. But with all this said, are we attending every aspiring section's aspirations? What do we need to do? Is it just giving money, or is it giving the overall ecosystem through which they themselves can aspire to grow? How do we reprioritize on very many domestic economic aspirations, and how do our resources grow in tandem? So that would be the third. I think I've said all largely macro. I didn't go into relevant or related micro issues, but they will.
Sorry, your mic.
Hello. Yeah. My supplementary to that would be, do you think we have done enough on investments? Do we think we have done enough on creating demand in the economy? And how do these two things relate to the big question of trade? Everybody is talking about India-UK trade has been signed and it is a welcome development. US trade deal is on the offing, it seems. How do you see all these investment, trade, and demand issues?
On investment from the government side, I can only say if public investments have been kept in place. Has it been static? Has it remained flat? Is it going horizontal or are we increasing? The numbers are there before you. Every year it's Prime Minister's clear instruction that you have to have the capital expenditure grow and grow significantly. And I confidently believe, based on the data before me, that that is one of the primary keys or one of the primary drivers of sustained economic growth. It can be higher, no doubt, but the level at which we've maintained is largely on the back of public capital expenditure and that which is growing every year. The other which from the government we can do is to make sure the policy on FDI is friendly enough, attractive enough to be able to get more and more investments happening in India. The third, which I didn't mention before, so the third is I can see now state governments also competing to attract investments. So each one is doing their very best. Some say states are successful and the others are catching up. So from government, whether it's state or the center, the two powerful instruments with which we can influence investment in the country is by government spending and also making policies which are attractive. What I'm not speaking about, and you may probably follow up asking me, is the Indian private sector investment going in pace with the public investments? In the first few years after COVID, probably not. In fact, why would I say COVID? In fact, even from 2019, once the twin balance sheet problem was addressed and the corporate tax was brought down, we can see that the balance sheets of the corporate sector has really become healthier. But today, what observers tell me and what I keep sometimes talking to industries, business leaders is, are they sitting over passive investable funds? Meaning investable funds which are being engaged passively rather than invest in producing more, invest in having capacity expansion and so on. So that's an issue which I would obviously want the industry to speak about. So on investment, that is my broad response. You asked me about the jobs
and trade.
And trade. On trade, I think you're seeing it covered in the media every day. It is bilateral trade which is taken priority over multilateral. Is that good? Is that bad? I can't comment now. But at least on bilateral, we are moving forward. And you're seeing in the last 4-5 years, agreements with Australia, agreements with UAE. Yesterday, the United Kingdom. Negotiations are very progressing with the US and also with the European Union. EFTA is something which I forgot in between, even that was the clear point.
So let me shift the focus outside India. You talked about the world in flux, and we always look at China. And how do you see India's relationship with China on the economic front evolve, particularly in the context of recent developments like we are relaxing visa norms for them, we are trying, so even your economic survey talked about relaxing a bit of economic investment from China. How do you see this China equation going forward?
Post-COVID and post-Galwan, not specific to China, but for all the bordering states, we had come up with the Press Note 3 because we didn't want investments or any big businesses happening with them. Immediately post that, I'm sure most of you all would have read it in newspapers, in some of the renewable energies areas where the entire project was being done by, let us say, China, and because of PN3, you had difficulties in getting the technical experts to come and continue with the project to get completed, couldn't travel. During COVID, it was largely because of their restrictions and our restrictions, global restrictions and so on, but PN3 also had a bearing on it. That to some extent was relaxed because the projects where, let's say, 2/3 of the activity had happened. The last 1/3 was suffering because we couldn't get the personnel who had to come to finalize and finish the project. And during the tariff war between the US and China, there was a lull. But yes, you're right in pointing out that there are now, from the bottom, if I can use that expression, a call saying we need more access and we need to have a lot more interaction and possibly opening some windows. And that's not just from our side, even Chinese, I think, have been approaching through the MEA. So you had the Foreign Minister, External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar go. There is some kind of a beginning. As to how much it will take us far, how far it will go, is something we'll have to wait and see. But it might help the economy. However much, a sense of caution would have to be built into this.
I mean, since Amita declared me as a friend, Amita, would you like to ask a question?
Just that, ma'am, in the last 7 years, you've been the finance minister, and when we've seen an intensification, as you yourself said, of the flux as far as the world is concerned, world economy is concerned, and we also see a flux as far as countries redefining their national interests. Friends and allies are getting redefined in this on a constant basis. In this atmosphere, when you attend multilateral meetings, at the G20, at the BRICS, World Bank, and IMF, are these meetings, face-to-face meetings, more challenging? Are the discussions more challenging in this phase? And if so, do you think this is only a passing phase?
We've resumed the bilateral conversation in the recent past. Conversations are pleasant, no doubt. But what you speak about are difficult things. And they're not negotiations yet, is what I would feel, at least from my last few engagements. It's more setting the table to order. Building on conversations and building on negotiations for an outcome, where obviously any negotiation which expects an outcome has to be a win-win. Some give, some take, but both sides will have to get something from it. At least in my case, we are setting the table to order as of now, and that can be hot and cold.
Thank you, ma'am, for being so patient with us. I cannot let you go before I invite Dr. Acharya to say a few words. What really, if anything, keeps you awake at night?
I sleep well, actually.
Maybe I'm told I'm a soft-spoken person, so can you hear me? Okay. I'll try and keep the speech lunch. Honorable Finance Minister, Ambassador Simon, my editor friends, and they're both very friendly to me and to each other. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll confine my remarks to expressing gratitude, a bit like a vote of thanks. To begin with, it's a pleasure and an honor to thank the Honorable Finance Minister for gracing this happy occasion. Having worked 15 long years in the Finance Ministry,